It's a real feel-good gospel, isn't it? Sing along with me if you know this song. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine. Good job. Was REM right when they sang those words? Is it the end of the world as we know it? Yes. Yes, it is. Do we feel fine? That's a tougher question to answer, isn't it? As we prepare to explore the gospel text in search of something to guide us, let's begin with prayer. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. Open our ears, our hearts, and our minds to the ongoing revelation that is your good news on this day and every day. Amen. I must have music on my mind this morning because I'm reminded of a line in Brandi Carlile's song, The Eye. Are you familiar with Brandi Carlile? If you're not, you should be. I feel like this line from Brandi Carlile's song could be written right into the passage from the Lucan Gospel that was just read for us this morning. The line, "You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye." Not avoid the hurricane and dance somewhere else. Not wait for the hurricane to pass by and dance later, but dance now, right in the center of the hurricane, in the eye. Today, in the Luke Gospel, Jesus stands with his disciples at the temple, the epicenter of religious permanence, the center of their world, indeed. And as the disciples looked up at the stones that were huge and immovable and gleaming with gold, they admire its solidity and its permanence in their world and in their life. You see, the temple had just been completed in the time of Jesus, about 80 years after construction first began. It was the work of King Herod. And the temple, when it was completed, was indeed a marvel of architectural engineering and beauty. And as the disciples stood around and looked at these great stones and the gold that was gleaming off of them and admiring its beauty, Jesus says, "Not one stone will be left upon another." Wah, wah, wah. What a Debbie Downer, Jesus. It must have felt to the disciples like a hurricane wind cutting right through them. And Jesus signaled an end. You see, the temple wasn't only a religious building. It was a symbol of social order. It was their cultural center. It was their identity as a people. And when Jesus says it will fall, what he's saying is the things that you rely on, the systems that feel eternal to you, the structures of our society that we think are permanent, are not. Jesus isn't saying this to try to terrify them. He's trying to reorient them. He's saying, in essence, don't confuse what's eternal with what's temporary. Because systems do fall. Sometimes the systems that we have trusted in too much. Institutions crack, friends. Cultural norms shift. Economies shake and tumble. Even the church can change. We live in our own era wherein the stones feel loose don't they? The foundations of the systems that for so long have shaped our own identity feel like they are becoming unmoored around us. It feels like a hurricane swirling around. And yet, in the midst of that, Jesus says, do not be frightened. Not because frightening things won't happen. Did you hear the list that Paula read? That was some bad stuff. Some of you may lose your life for my name, Jesus says. He's clear that the hurricane will come. You see, systems may crumble, is what Jesus is trying to say. Systems indeed will crumble. In some cases, in many cases, it will be an end, but not an end to God. This is the first piece of good news. Just because the system falls doesn't mean that hope falls with it. In fact, sometimes systems need to fail. Sometimes stones must come down. Sometimes the shaking exposes the cracks that we would not have seen otherwise. Sometimes what seems like destruction is actually a clearing ground for liberation to come in its place. When old assumptions collapse, new imaginations can rise. Jesus' warnings are ultimately about transformation. It's what he's trying to get the people to see. He's trying to get them to reframe what they're seeing as birth pangs rather than death throes. And even in the midst of those throes, Jesus gives us our second piece of good news. In the midst of that, we can still practice joy. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. Many years ago, when I was in my 20s and 30s, a group of several friends and I would travel every year to a little island off the coast of Cancun called Isla Mujeres. And we would spend about a week to 10 days on this little island that was not too touristy at the time. Now it is, unfortunately. But we would go every single October. And I remember one year, about 20 years ago, we were planning to go. There were 4 of us as couples who were planning to go. And it was right around the time that same-gendered marriage had just been legalized in one state, Massachusetts, but nowhere else in the United States. But those who were going, 3 of the 4 couples of us, not me, were going, decided to get married there on Isla Mujeres. And each evening, during our last 3 nights on the island, we were going to have 3 beachside ceremonies. They weren't legal, they were personal to each one of these 3 couples. And I wasn't a minister yet at the time, but they chose me to officiate their non-legal and non-binding marriages. And so 8 of us traveled to the island, and the first day we were kind of orienting ourselves to the island. We'd been there before, but this was a return trip, and we loved it. And the second day, we were really in vacation mode. And so all 8 of us went to lunch together and had lunch at this great little restaurant. And we had a handful of margaritas and maybe a few more cervezas. And then we did the worst thing you could do. We rented mopeds. We got on our mopeds. It was 2, each couple got their own moped. And we decided we were going to take the 5-mile trek on our mopeds across the island to the other end to go to the sea turtle sanctuary. This was right after our margarita lunch. And we were riding along the road there on Isla Mujeres and doing stupid things. Kids, don't do what we did. My son is in the room. Don't do that, Brody. We were driving poorly and stupidly. And I remember watching from behind in horror as my friends Jenny and Sherry lost control of their moped, and it went up this curb that was about that tall off the side of the road. It was a curb that was half formed. It went up and then it cut straight down to about 6-inch fall to the dirt below. Their moped launched up this curb and they went flying through the air. And my friend Sherry landed on the edge of the curb, and immediately her leg right here, her thigh, split open to the bone. And my friend Jenny tumbled across the road with her on her face and her stomach and hit her head on the side of the curb. Just got not so funny real fast, huh? It's exactly what it was like in the moment. We rushed to our friend's aid, and there was no 911 that we could call. We did not know what to do, and Jenny and Sherry both are nurses, and Sherry sat up and instructed us what to do for her wound, to close her wound with our hands as best we could to try to stop the bleeding until some help could arrive. Eventually, by a miracle of God, the first vehicle that passed by was a pickup truck full of 6 to 8 Mexican Navy men. There was a small Navy outpost there on Isla Mujeres, and they had their M16 rifles, and without even saying much, we flagged them down, and they saw what had happened, and they assessed that Sherry was in critical need. And so they picked her up, and they put her in the back of their truck, and they just drove off. And so a few of us decided to jump on mopeds and travel with her so we would know where she was going. The rest of us stayed with Jenny until we could flag down another car. And they loaded her in the back of their car and took her to a hospital, and some of us went with her. There were 2 different hospitals on Isla Mujeres. There was the small little hospital that treated, common cold or the broken finger or things like that. Not very well equipped. And then there was the hospital at the Navy outpost, which was much better equipped. Fortunately, that's the hospital that Sherry ended up at. Sherry, as we went to the hospital, we could hear her out in the waiting room as she was in the surgery room, giving them instructions. Sterilize that better, wash it, clean it better. She was telling them what to do to care for her wound. And they sewed her up. Jenny went to the other hospital, and they kept her. She had some pretty severe damage, some pretty severe road rash. But there was no place for them to stay. There's no beds in the hospital for sleeping overnight on Isla Mujeres. So they sent them back to their hotel, saying that they could probably heal better at the hotel than at any other place they could recommend. This was day 2 of our 8-day trip. On the 3rd day, we all gathered together, the 6 of us who were uninjured, and we talked about, what do? We've got to get them home. They were in bad shape. And so we went to their room to stage something of an intervention and say, look, this is what we've got to do. And we went in, and they were in pain. They were miserable. And we said, we got to get you home. We got to go. And Sherry said, no. I am here to marry my wife. We've been together for 10 years, and I'm going to marry her on the beach at sunset on October 31st, just as we planned. We said, okay. We spent the next few days helping the best we could, changing dressing over and over, going to the pharmacia and getting drugs that we couldn't dream about getting here. Taking care of our dear friends. And on the last full night of our trip, Sherry and Jenny, bandaged literally from head to toe, walked out to that beach because of great love for one another and celebrated their wedding. And as the sun set on that beach, we all watched as in great pain and hardship, they danced their wedding dance in the setting sun. Joy can happen anywhere and everywhere. No matter what the circumstances of our life may be, you can dance in a hurricane if you're standing in the eye. And the eye isn't denial. It isn't pretending that everything is fine. It's a place of deep spiritual grounding. The place that Jesus describes when he says to his disciples in this text, I will give you words and wisdom, and by your endurance you will gain your very life. And that brings us to our third piece of good news. Joy, as described in the scriptures, isn't a mood. It's a spiritual location. It's the eye of the hurricane. It's the calm center from which we face the world with clarity and love and resilience. Joy then doesn't happen because everything is okay. Joy is how we remember who we are when everything is not okay. Joy is resistance. It is the very dance itself. The good news, friends, is not that there is no storm. The good news is that we are not alone in it. We have been given everything that we need to be able to dance in the center of it. When the disciples stared up at that temple in awe, they saw stability and permanence. Jesus saw fragility, impermanence, but also possibility. He knew what would fall. He knew that eventually it all falls. He knew it was, indeed, the end of something. In the 1990s, the band Semisonic taught us in their 1990s hit, Closing Time. You know that song? Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Actually, that was Roman philosopher Seneca who said that. They just stole it for their song. But you get the point. Jesus knew an end would come. And he knew what could rise from the rubble. Do we? Do we know that the end is here? Because the end is always here. Some ending is always among us. Jesus, when he knew what was to come, said to his disciples and by extension to us, stand in the eye and dance. Root yourselves in God, not in the systems of the world that shake and tumble and fall, but in the holy center of God's peace and love. And then, beloved one, don't just stand there, dance. Be filled with joy, for something new and good and righteous and holy and peaceful is afoot. We can dance in a hurricane, but only if we're standing in the eye.